Chapter 121. She smiled at Fei Yaju and said, "If I didn't come, how could I see such an interesting thing?" He. The Emperor is so good to the Empress. Fu Ruoqing's face paled slightly as she laughed dryly. "Jingyu Liang, I heard about your matter when I came." Fei Yaju glanced at Fu Ruoqing and said, "Since you want to be fair and just, why don't you let this queen be your judge? This queen is the mother of a country and has nothing to do with you two. What do you think? If the Empress is willing to personally come, we naturally have no objections." Jingyu grinned and said, "But since this is a competition, it's only interesting to have a prize." "Oh? What prize do you want?" Fei Yaju turned to look at Jingyu with a faint smile in her eyes. "I'm a person who is very interested in gold and silver." Jingyu rolled her eyes and said, "If I win, I want Princess Liang to give me 20 million taels of gold." "What a big appetite." Princess Liang sneered at Jingyu and said, "If you lose, I want you to stand on the horse track and shout 10 times that you're an idiot. You also have to kneel down and kowtow to me." "No problem." Jingyu agreed without thinking. She looked provocatively at Princess Liang and said, "But I'm afraid that Princess Liang will go back on her words. Why don't we sign a contract as proof?" "That's exactly what I was thinking." Princess Liang raised her chin and said. Everyone was stunned as they watched the two sign a contract and sign it. Shangguan Linglan didn't even have time to speak. When he saw Jingyu's handprint, he immediately pulled Jingyu to the side in horror and said, "Are you crazy? Do you know how to ride a horse?" "I know a little, but I haven't ridden in a long time." Jingyu shrugged and thought about the last time she rode a horse. It seemed to be when she went to the forest with Xing Er and encountered an assassin. Shangguan Linglan's mouth twitched. He took a deep breath and said, "How about I do it for you?" "What are you talking about? I've already put my handprint." Jingyu waved her hand to tell Shangguan Linglan not to worry. The servants had already brought a horse over. Everyone stepped onto the stage to watch. Jingyu looked at the horse. It was a good horse. "Jingyu, be careful." Shangguan Linglan still felt uneasy as she worriedly looked at Jingyu. "Don't worry." Jingyu naughtily stuck out her tongue and mounted the horse. Her clean and neat movements made everyone's eyes light up. However, the moment she got on the horse, her body swayed a little. She looked like she couldn't sit properly. Shangguan Linglan, who had just calmed down, suddenly became worried. Yaya is too impulsive. Ning Shengyuan's face was also full of worry. She watched as Jingyu rode the horse to the starting point. She looked very careful. She didn't look like she was riding a horse at all. Jingyu's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery. She looked sideways at Princess Liang with a mocking smile. Princess Liang looked at Jingyu and arrogantly raised her chin. She sneered at Jingyu and said, "Don't worry. I won't let you lose too badly. Let me say this to you instead." Jingyu looked back at Princess Liang with the same arrogance. "You have a sharp tongue. I'd like to see how you're going to deal with this later." Princess Liang snorted coldly. Following a guard's shout, Princess Liang didn't stay any longer and galloped out on her horse. Jingyu forcefully lashed out with her whip, causing the horse to stop for a moment in pain before rushing out. Chapter 122. Shangguan Linglan, who was on the spectator stand, covered his face with his hands. Was this how a horse whip should be used? He was really afraid that Jingyu would accidentally fall off her horse. The entire horse track was incomparably large, and it would take a long time to circle around it. Just as Jingyu and Liang's horses galloped out, the emperor and the princes who were participating in the ceremony arrived one after another. The civil and military officials also arrived one after another. When everyone heard about the competition between the two, they immediately became interested. They laughed and said that it would be a warm-up for the horse race. At this time, Jingyu and Liang had already galloped far away. One could vaguely see their silhouettes. Princess Liang was still far in the lead while Jingyu was lagging behind. Furthermore, looking at the situation, why was the distance between them getting longer and longer? Haha, it seems like the outcome has already been decided. Xiaoyi, who was on the high seat, narrowed his eyes as he watched the two galloping horses galloping in the distance. The horses have not returned yet. Isn't it too early for your majesty to say this? Xiao Chun, who was dressed in a black palace robe with a coiling dragon totem embroidered on it, sat at a slightly lower position beside Xiaoyi. He held a cup of tea in his hand and took a sip as he narrowed his eyes and spoke coldly. "Oh, ninth brother has a lot of confidence in your imperial concubine?" Xiaoyi narrowed his eyes as he spoke. Xiao Qin's lips moved slightly, but he did not speak. He narrowed his eyes and continued to watch the competition below. At this time, the horses of the two racers had already begun to return to the track. Everyone raised their heads in anticipation as they watched the two racers galloping over. Jingyu slowly narrowed her eyes and looked at Princess Leong, who was in front of her. The corners of her mouth curled up into a cold smile. She bent down and lowered her body even lower. She patted the horse under her and said, "I've let you rest and recharge for so long. Now, charge." Jingyu's words fell, and she flicked the whip in her hand. The horse beneath her suddenly sped up and rushed towards the finish line. Heavens! Quickly look, Jingyu is chasing after them. Shangguan Linglan was so excited that he stood up and pointed at the two on the track. She's catching up. He's catching up. Originally, they thought that the outcome was already decided, but at this time, there was a sudden reversal. Everyone in the stands stood up and shouted excitedly. Even Emperor Xiaoyi was surprised and widened his eyes. Princess Leong naturally noticed the commotion outside. She was slightly startled and turned around to take a look. If she didn't take a look, she wouldn't have known. However, the moment she did, she was shocked. Jingyu, who had been left behind by a large distance, had actually caught up with her. Damn it! Princess Leong's eyes were filled with anger. Looking at Jingyu's skillful riding skills, how could she not know how to ride a horse? It was obvious that he was an expert who knew how to ride a horse, yet he pretended that he didn't know how to ride a horse. He really deserved to die. Go! Princess Leong fiercely flicked her whip. In her heart, she thought that no matter what, she couldn't let Jingyu overtake her. Jingyu slowly narrowed her eyes and looked at the horse beneath Princess Leong. Because it had used up a lot of energy, it didn't have much energy left to charge forward. However, Jingyu's horse was different. It had been moving at a constant speed, so now was the best time to charge forward. The distance between the two was quickly closing. When Princess Leong turned her head, Jingyu's horse had already caught up to Princess Leong's side. Jingyu slowly turned her head to look at Princess Leong and said with a smile, "I'm sorry, I have to go first." Chapter 123. Jingyu slowly tilted her head to look at Princess Leong and said with a smile, "My apologies, I'll be leaving first." Princess Leong looked at the horse that was slowly overtaking her and anger rose from her heart. She suddenly raised the horsewhip in her hand and lashed it towards Jingyu. That action was seen by the surrounding spectators, and they all sucked in a breath of cold air as they stared blankly at the horsewhip that Princess Leong lashed out. Jingyu's expression suddenly sank. She hugged the horse that she was riding and slid to the side. She leaned over and dodged Princess Leong's horsewhip. That difficult dodging action was seen by the crowd, and they all widened their eyes in shock. Good. Jingyu abruptly leaped onto the horse and coldly glanced at Princess Leong. Without any hesitation, she urged the horse to charge towards the finish line. That beautiful figure that leaped over the finish line caused Xiaoyi to cheer loudly. He didn't expect that he would be able to see such an exciting horse race today. Xiao Qin watched as Jingyu leaped over the finish line. He slowly released the cup that he had been holding tightly in his hand. However, his gaze towards Princess Leong was cold and deep. "Princess Leong, you've lost." Jingyu stood on the horse and looked at Princess Leong, who had leaped over the finish line behind her. Her lips curled into a cold arc as she said, "I won't pursue the matter of that whip just now. Just treat it as my apology for playing tricks on you in the restaurant. Today, you'll fulfill your part of the bet, and we won't owe each other anything." "Who cares about your pity?" Princess Leong coldly stared at Jingyu. She leaped off the horse and walked towards the stage with large strides. She knelt on the ground and said, "Leong knows that she broke the rules and almost caused Jingyu to fall off the horse. I'm willing to enter the punishment hall to be punished. I ask for your majesty's permission." Jingyu was stunned as she looked at Princess Leong's actions. Her eyes flashed slightly. She didn't expect Princess Leong to be someone who dared to take responsibility for her actions. This, Xiao Yi frowned slightly as he looked at Fu Ruoqing. Your Majesty, punish those who should be punished. Your Majesty is the ruler of a country. Naturally, you must be fair in your rewards and punishments. Fu Ruoqing's expression changed unpredictably. She narrowed her eyes slightly and said, Forget it, just 10 strikes as a warning. Xiao Yi said with a frown. Thank you, Your Majesty. Princess Leong stood up and turned to look at Jingyu, who had already dismounted from her horse. She sneered and said, I will not let this matter rest. Heh, if you want to die, I won't show you any mercy. Jingyu raised her eyebrows in disdain. Don't forget about my gold. Remember, I don't want anything but gold. Jingyu narrowed her eyes and grinned at Princess Leong. Princess Leong was so angry that her face turned red, but there was nothing she could do. She turned around and followed the guard to the punishment hall. Jingyu slowly raised her head and met Fu Ruoqing's gaze. Fu Ruoqing's cold eyes looked at her, causing Jingyu to tremble violently. Now, he had offended all the people he should have offended. He had even offended them to the point of death. Jingyu, you've really made us have a whole new level of respect for you. Xiao Yi looked at Jingyu with a face full of smiles and said, I didn't think that you would have such good riding skills. Oh, it's nothing. Jingyu shrugged and said, I just rode the horse like a wolf. What? You rode the horse like a wolf? Xiao Yi stared and suddenly laughed loudly. He turned to look at Xiao Qian and said, Ninth brother, your imperial concubine is really interesting. She even knows how to tell jokes to make us happy. Ha ha ha. Io, who's making you happy? Chapter 124. Io, who's trying to make you happy? I'm just telling the truth, okay? Also, why would I want to make you happy? Jingyu was suddenly speechless. Looking at the cheerful Xiao Yi, the corners of her mouth twitched. Xiao Qin's expression changed slightly as he waved at Jingyu, indicating for her to come to his side. On the other side, Shangguan Linglan was also waving at Jingyu. Suddenly, Jingyu was confused. Should she go to Xiao Qin's place? Or should she go to Shangguan Linglan's place? Jingyu silently compared the two. If she didn't go to the other party's place, what would the outcome be? In the end, she still went to Xiao Qin's place. She still wanted to stay in the Wangfu for a while, so she could only choose her lover over her friend. How come I didn't know that your horsemanship was so good? Xiao Chun looked at Jingyu obediently sitting beside him. The corners of his mouth softened as he lightly asked, There are many things that you don't know. Jingyu proudly lifted her chin and raised her hand to pour herself a cup of tea. Next up was the long-awaited polo match. Jingyu drank a mouthful of tea and listened to the officials below explaining the rules. Jingyu looked at the live version of the polo match and was amazed. She had seen it on television before. She never thought that she would be able to see it live today. Speaking of which, Jingyu blinked and looked sideways at Xiao Chun and said, Why aren't you going down to play? Xiao Chun narrowed his eyes at Jingyu. After staring at Jingyu for a while, he faintly said, Does this king look like someone who plays polo? Ah, yes, yes, yes. You're a great master. Jingyu dryly laughed as she poured tea for Xiao Chun. She couldn't help but think to herself, Do you need to look at the players when playing polo? But if you want to watch, this king doesn't mind going down to play. Xiao Chun looked at Jingyu's expression and his eyes flashed with a faint smile. Jingyu was suddenly shocked. When did her face become so big? She actually managed to invite Xiao Chun. Jingyu looked at Xiao Chun, telling Xiao Yi that he would go down to play a few rounds as an opening ball. Xiao Yi was obviously shocked. When Xiao Yi announced this, the entire horse track was in an uproar, all the ladies from the officials' families. Sigh. His popularity was really unusually high. It's rare for the 9th emperors to be in such a good mood. How about this prince and the 9th emperor's play around together? Xiao Jingran stood up and squinted at Xiao Chun with a faint smile. This king is very happy to have the second prince accompany him. Xiao Chun coldly responded. Although he said he was happy, his face was expressionless. Xiao Chun and Xiao Jingran each went to change into a set of riding clothes. Then, they rode their horses onto the horse track. Jingyu stared at the people below. Their attractiveness wasn't just for show. listening to the cheers outside the track. It was so enthusiastic that it was about to overturn the horse track. There were two teams of people below. One team had red scarves on their arms, while the other team had blue scarves on their arms. Xiao Chun and Xiao Jingran each led one team. Xiao Chun led the red team, while Xiao Jingran led the blue team. Thus, the game began and the polo ball game began. Wow! Jingyu stared with wide eyes. She looked at the horses galloping on the field and the ball rolling under the horses' feet. The two teams competed fiercely. Every time the ball was about to be scored, it would be intercepted by the other team. The spectators were all frightened. Oh my God! Is that man a pig? Jingyu stared at the moment when the ball was about to be scored. Chapter 125. Oh damn! Is that man a pig? Jingyu stared at the moment when the ball was about to be scored. One of the men in Xiao Qin's team actually slipped, and the ball was snatched away by the other side. Jingyu was instantly angered to the point of choking. Who should be angry? It's about to go in. It's about to go in. Aya. Jingyu suddenly stood up and saw that the ball was snatched away again. Her face turned green and she couldn't sit still any longer. She ran down the high platform. This series of actions attracted the attention of the emperor and the other concubines. They all looked at Jingyu, not knowing what she wanted to do. Why is Jingyu on a horse? Xiaoyi slightly frowned as he looked at Jingyu, who was riding a horse into the field. His eyes widened in shock. She's a woman? Why is she competing with a man? Empress Fei Yaju slightly frowned. Everyone had clearly noticed Jingyu, and they all started whispering. Jingyu inserted herself into Xiao Qin's team with a club and directly squeezed away the man that she didn't like. Xiao Chun and Xiao Jingran were stunned when they saw Jingyu suddenly appear on the field. Xiao Chun, you cut off their path of retreat. You guys surround Xiao Jingran. I'll score. Jingyu's lips curled into a devilish smile as she gave this order to everyone without any warning. Xiao Qin's eyes slightly narrowed. Under everyone's shocked and frightened gazes, he slowly replied, Okay, heavens, not only did she call the ninth emperor by his name, she even gave an order to the ninth emperor. Most importantly, the ninth emperor actually agreed. Everyone in the team felt slightly dizzy. Seeing that the ninth emperor had obediently followed her orders, they naturally didn't dare to disobey. They followed Jingyu's instructions and swarmed towards Xiao Jingran. Jingyu narrowed her eyes as she looked at the man dribbling the ball. She had clearly seen everything from the stands. Xiao Jingran was the best in this team. Without Xiao Jingran leading the team, Jingyu was confident that she could pass the ball. Handsome. Jingyu turned her horse and blocked the dribbler's path. She smiled like a flower as she called out. The dribbler originally wanted to pass the ball, but he was stunned by Jingyu's call-out. He looked at Jingyu in confusion and blinked. I'm praising you. Jingyu waved the club in her hand, turned around, and snatched the ball under his club. Laughing loudly, she dribbled the ball and ran away. The man who was blushing because of Jingyu's words finally reacted. He cursed in a low voice and hurriedly chased after her. Jingyu nimbly moved the ball in her hand. Her superb dribbling skills made the surrounding spectators cry out in surprise. Xiaoyi, who was sitting high above, was also amazed. He didn't expect Jingyu to have such a trick up her sleeve. Why is this ball so disobedient? Jingyu pouted as she moved the ball forward. She glanced sideways at the members of the blue team who were surrounding her from all directions. Her lips curled into a cold arc as she watched them get closer and closer. Finally, just as the ball was about to reach Jingyu, Jingyu forcefully swung the club in her hand and threw the polo ball far away. Everyone stared at the ball in a daze. Jingyu forcefully swung her whip and chased after the ball, once again displaying her beautiful riding skills. Xiao Chen urged his horse forward and blocked the members of the blue team who were chasing after the ball. He watched as Jingyu slid down her whip and swung the club. He watched as the polo ball flew into the net without any obstruction. Jingyu walked to the gongs and drums and just had to sound them. However, Xiao Chun, it's too high. I can't hit it. Jingyu complained as she looked at Xiao Chun. She felt wronged as she looked at the gongs and drums hanging high in the air. Chapter 126. He was simply looking down on her height. Xiao Qin looked at Jing Yu's scrunched-up little face, and his lips slowly curled into a smile. He placed his hand on the back of his horse and sat down on Jing Yu's horse. He took the gongs and drums from Jing Yu's hands and raised his hand to sound the gongs and drums of victory. Immediately, the entire racetrack was filled with excited cheers. "Ah, it's over?" The members of Team Red who were still pestering Xiao Qin finally came back to their senses and turned to look at Jing Yu, who was in Xiao Qin's arms. Their eyes were filled with surprise and smiles. They didn't think that the 9th Imperial Concubine would have such ability. Ha ha ha. Great. This opening ball has really broadened my horizons. Xiao Yi raised his head and laughed loudly. He looked at Xiao Chun and Jing Yu, who were strolling over, and nodded with a smile. He turned to look at the gloomy Xiao Jingran and said, "Jingran, you should learn more from your 9th emperors." "Yes, your son will definitely learn from the 9th emperors." The corners of Xiao Jingran's lips curled into a smile, and his words sounded like he was gnashing his teeth in anger. Xiao Qin extended his hand and held Jing Yu's hand as they walked up the stairs. When they were halfway up, Jing Yu suddenly grabbed Xiao Qin's hand. Xiao Qian turned his head and looked at Jing Yu suspiciously. Jing Yu carefully looked at Xiao Chun and said, "I want to go over there," Jing Yu said as she pointed in the direction of Shangguan Linglan. "Go." Xiao Qin's eyes flashed with dissatisfaction, but he still slowly let go of his hand. He rubbed Jing Yu's head and said indifferently. After receiving permission, Jing Yu happily ran over to Shangguan Linglan and Ning Shangyuan's side. It really wasn't easy to please the 9th emperors. Jing Yu. Jing Yu. Shangguan Linglan saw Jing Yu coming over and immediately pulled Jing Yu's hand excitedly and said, "I want you to teach me how to ride a horse. That polo match just now was simply too beautiful." "I want to learn too." Ning Shangyuan nodded and looked at Jing Yu with admiration and said, "I didn't expect you to have such good riding skills. Quickly teach us." Jing Yu helplessly looked at the two and said, "I really was riding a horse like a wolf. How about you two give it a try?" "Aya, don't hit me, don't hit me. I'm just joking." Jing Yu hurriedly dodged Shangguan Linglan and Ning Shangyuan's pink fists and said with a smile, "I'll teach you. It's just riding a horse. You must keep your word." Shangguan Linglan and Ning Shangyuan were instantly happy. They sat down and discussed the time. The polo match suddenly became boring. It was probably because the excitement of the opening match had yet to pass. However, the people on the field attracted Jing Yu's attention. "Who is the leader of the blue team?" Jing Yu asked as she propped up her chin. "It's the 3rd prince, Xiao Xiangqing. He's a brave lord. But he's brave but not smart." Shangguan Linglan pursed his lips and said, "This time, he took the initiative to play polo because he wanted to show his face beside the emperor." How many princes are there in the palace?" Jing Yu blinked and asked. "There are still princes in the palace. The crown prince, Xiao Yuling, has a chronic illness and rarely appears in front of everyone. You've seen the 2nd prince, Xiao Jingran. The 2nd prince is also the biggest competitor for the crown prince position. The 3rd prince is the one I just told you about. There's also the 5th prince, Xiao Zhiyu, who is stubborn and mischievous. There's also the 9th prince, who is still young and still a child." Chapter 127. Shangguan Linglan shrugged and said. Jing Yu's eyes widened. She knew that there were many princes in the royal family, but she didn't expect there to be so many. Then, what about the other princes? Jing Yu blinked and asked. "The fight for the throne. Those who deserve to die are all dead." Shangguan Linglan carefully moved closer to Jing Yu's ear and said, "The emperor has more than 10 children. Some of them died as soon as they were born." Hiss. Jing Yu sucked in a breath of cold air. This was a real-life version of seizing the throne. Now the throne is in the hands of the crown prince and the 2nd prince. Shangguan Linglan lowered his voice and said to Jing Yu, "I eavesdropped from my father. The crown prince has the support of the 9 emperors. That's why he can sit on the throne. Otherwise, he would have been dethroned long ago." Jing Yu was slightly shocked. She finally understood why Xiao Jingran and Xiao Chun were always against each other. It turned out that Xiao Chun was on the crown prince's side. "But it's none of your business." Shangguan Linglan looked at Jing Yu's frightened face. He raised his hand and patted Jing Yu's shoulder and said, You're a girl with no background. You're not a threat to those princes. They won't pay attention to you. It feels good to not be pressured by your family. Shangguan Linglan patted Jing Yu's shoulder enviously. What's so good about it? Jing Yu helplessly shrugged and said, You can marry the person you like. Shangguan Linglan looked at Jing Yu and said, As the young miss of the general's residence in the future, not only will I have to be matched in terms of social status, I might even have to marry someone I don't like because of the political power of the court. Shangguan Linglan lowered her gaze. No way, this is a forced marriage. Jing Yu widened her eyes and said, Yeah, this is the family. There are good and bad sides. Ning Shangyuan's eyes dimmed slightly as she said. Jing Yu suddenly fell silent. There were gains and losses. No one watched the rest of the competition. Jing Yu also returned to Xiao Qin's side. She held her chin and looked like she was in deep thought. Jing Yu's sudden silence made Xiao Qin feel a little strange. Are you tired? Xiao Qin looked at Jing Yu, who was holding her chin in a daze. Jing Yu glanced at Xiao Qin without saying anything. Xiao Qin frowned. What did she mean by looking at him without saying anything? Haha, this Jing Lang is really getting better and better. Emperor Xiao Ye's praise came from the high seat. Jing Yu was slightly stunned and looked up. Only then did she see that the person who went up was actually Jing Lang. That riding outfit and handsome appearance really had the demeanor of a general. Jing Yu blinked and looked at Jing Lang's movements. She was shocked to find that he had used the same method she had used against Xiao Jingran. He broke through the encirclement and scored by himself. Interesting. Ha ha ha. Xiao Yi obviously saw it too. He clapped his hands and laughed. He turned to look at Jing Yu and said, Look at the situation. I didn't expect that he would learn your tactics. Interesting. Ha ha ha. Jing Yu laughed dryly. She blinked and looked at Jing Lang as he walked forward. Xiao Yi smiled and gave him a reward. When Jing Lang left, his gaze fell on Jing Yu. However, he looked away after a glance. There was nothing strange about it. After the cold food festival, Jing Yu was exhausted. She dragged her body back to her courtyard. Chapter 128. After the cold food festival, Jing Yu was completely exhausted. She dragged her body back to her own courtyard and laid on the bed without moving. She was still thinking about what Shangguan Linglan said today. She pursed her lips slightly and sank into deep thought. Imperial Consort. Imperial Consort. The next morning, Jing Yu was still asleep when she was woken up by Yin Xiao's excited voice. What are you shouting for so early in the morning? Jing Yu kicked away Xiao Qin's leg that was propped on her body. She looked at Xiao Qin's sleepy appearance and helplessly rubbed her forehead. Why was it that she could see this guy sleeping on her bed every morning when she woke up? He was clearly nowhere to be seen before she went to bed. Jing Yu stared speechlessly at Xiao Qin. She walked past him and got off the bed to open the door. She looked at the excited Yin Xiao and asked, What is it? Imperial Consort. Gold. A lot of gold was sent over. Yin Xiao looked at Jing Yu excitedly and said, Jing Yu was originally still a little sleepy. When she heard the gold, her entire body shuddered and she completely woke up. She tugged at Yin Xiao and asked, Where is it? Xingyi Darren sent it to the courtyard. This servant had it moved into the small room. Yin Xiao pointed outside the courtyard and said, Go, let's go take a look. Jing Yu pulled Yin Xiao and was about to go over. Imperial Consort's clothes. You're not wearing an outer garment. Yin Xiao grabbed Jing Yu, who was about to leave, and said. Jing Yu looked at her appearance in her inner garment and helplessly rubbed her forehead. She really didn't know what the ancient people were thinking. She wasn't even naked. Why did she have to wear an extra layer of clothing? Jing Yu turned and walked into the room. She looked at Xiao Qin, who was still lying down, and said unhappily, Xiao Qin, hurry and get up. Someone sent gold to your door. Xiao Qin slowly opened his eyes and looked at Jing Yu with narrowed eyes and said, You like gold that much? I do. Who doesn't like money? Jing Yu said as she put on her clothes. Xiao Qin stood up and said faintly, There are many in the storehouse. Take them if you like. Pooh. Jing Yu looked at Xiao Qin in horror. After confirming that Xiao Qin wasn't joking, she became excited. How could this man give all the money to her so easily? Why do I feel like there's a conspiracy here? No. Xiao She must not fall into a trap. That's your money. I don't want it. Jingyu raised her chin arrogantly. Xiao Qin's eyes darkened. Yin Xiao watched in astonishment as Xiao Qun and Jingyu walked out of the house. Her little heart was pounding. From the looks of it, the 9 emperors had been inside the house the whole time when she was making a fuss. Yin Xiao immediately shrank to the side and didn't dare to raise her head to look at Jingyu. Jingyu followed Yin Xiao's footsteps and arrived at the room filled with gold. The moment she opened the door, she saw the boxes of glistening gold. She instantly cheered and pounced over. She touched the boxes of gold and drooled. This is real gold, eh? Xiao Qun looked at Jingyu indifferently. He looked at her greedy face and said, "What do you plan to do with this gold?" "Of course it's to get rich." Jingyu stood up excitedly and said, "I want to build a beautiful house. Take over a mountain. Then I'll buy Jinyan restaurant." Jingyu said. Her heart was filled with excitement. Build a house? Xiao Qin's face slowly darkened. He looked at Jingyu and said, "You want to move out of the mansion?" Chapter 129. Build a house? Xiao Qin's face slowly darkened. He looked deeply at Jingyu and said, "You want to move out of the palace?" Cough, cough, cough. When Jingyu heard Xiao Qin's words, which were filled with killing intent, she suddenly trembled. She hastily ran to Xiao Qin's side and fawningly said, "How could that be? Look, the two of us aren't married yet." "No, we're not married yet." Junimo she swallowed and looked at Xiao Qin's gloomy face. "I just want to try the feeling of being welcomed into the family. If I stay in the palace, won't I not feel like I'm getting married? Getting married is a big thing. It only happens once in a lifetime. You can't be so hasty. You will definitely fulfill my small request." Jingyu looked pitifully at Xiao Qun and blinked her eyes. Xiao Qun continued to be silent, but his expression softened a lot. Even if you don't like it, we can build a house. In the future, it can be our wedding room." Jingyu carefully looked at Xiao Qun and said, "Wedding room?" Xiao Qun raised his eyebrows in confusion. Jingyu racked her brains trying to convince Xiao Qun, but in the end, she threw out this sentence, That's right. In the future, that house will be our world." "Our world?" Xiao Qun frowned again. He stared at Jingyu and said, "In this palace, if you don't want to be disturbed, I will chase them out." Don't. Jingyu wiped the sweat from her forehead. "Oh my, why is it so tiring to convince this man? What matters between husband and wife is the mood. Do you understand the mood?" Jingyu angrily glared at Xiao Qin and said, "Don't you think that living in the house you built will have more atmosphere? You don't understand romance at all. If you don't agree, then forget it." Jingyu pouted and turned to leave. Just as she turned, the silent Xiao Qun pulled her into his embrace. Jingyu was shocked. She looked up at Xiao Qin's burning eyes and suddenly blushed. Hey, why is she blushing? It's not like I've never been hugged or seen before. You can't wait to start planning the wedding? Jingyu could clearly hear the joy in Xiao Qin's voice. I just want to build a house that I like." Jingyu's cheeks instantly turned red as she hurriedly lowered her head. "Okay, if you want to build it." Xiao Qin's lips slowly curved into a smile as he said, "Where do you want to build it? Tell Xing-Yi to mark out the land. If you need manpower, this king's army will be at your beck and call." Jingyu's eyes widened in shock. She looked at Xiao Qin with fear and surprise in her eyes. She looked at Xiao Qin excitedly and said, "Really? Really? When has this king ever gone back on his word?" Xiao Qin calmly raised his eyebrows. "Wow, Xiao Qin, I like you so much." Jingyu suddenly jumped up in joy. She excitedly hugged Xiao Qin and cheered. Her excited words made Xiao Qin's eyes slowly deepen. Jingyu's cheers made Xiao Qin's heart flutter. "This king is very happy," Xiao Qin said as he tightly hugged Jingyu's waist and looked deeply into Jingyu's eyes. Jingyu was slightly stunned. She blinked and looked at Xiao Qin. "Grow up quickly." Xiao Qin bent down and pecked Jingyu's lips. He let go of her and walked away with steady steps, leaving behind a dazed Jingyu. What just happened? What the hell did Xiao Qin mean by saying grow up quickly? Chapter 130. Jingyu's hair stood on end. She lowered her head to look at her 14-year-old body and thought about the fact that she had not slept with Xiao Chun every day. When she thought about Xiao Chun's age, she was instantly terrified. In ancient times, Xiao Chun would have had multiple wives at his age, but he did not have a single woman. Not to mention women, there was not even a female cat in the prince's residence other than her and Yin Xiao. What was going on? Oh my God. Xiao Chun looked like he couldn't wait to eat her up. Jingyu did not feel good. Looking at the gold on the ground, she suddenly lost her enthusiasm and fell into deep thought. She was a woman in her 30s or 40s. She really hadn't thought about the relationship between husband and wife. Furthermore, if the person she was considering was Xiao Chun, Yin Xiao. Jingyu suddenly stood up and shouted, "This servant is here." "What's wrong, imperial concubine?" Yin Xiao quickly ran in and bowed. "Quickly go and see if there is any empty land in the city. I want to build a house." Jingyu pulled Yin Xiao and ran out. There was only one thought left in her mind. Quickly move out. This was a wolf's den. What if one day Xiao Chun could not control himself and pounced on her? Mamma mia. So scary. However, before Jingyu could choose a piece of land to build a house on, the etiquette course had already begun intense training. The academy had issued an order to conduct a 1-month closed-door training. The purpose was naturally to prepare for the etiquette assessment in June. What? Closed completely? Jingyu widened her eyes in shock. She blinked and asked Xiao Chun. Yes. Xiao Chun indifferently handed the invitation to Jingyu. How can it be like this? Was it like this in the past? Jingyu frowned and asked as she looked at the contents of the invitation. In the past, there were also closed-door training, but it was only for 10 days. Xiao Chun raised his hand to take a sip of tea and said, but this time, it was the Empress Dowager who spoke. She said that she wanted to make the etiquette better, so the 10 days of seclusion was increased to a month. This is too perverted. Jingyu's lips twitched as she said pitifully, in other words, I have to be locked up in the academy for a month? Okay. Xiao Chun narrowed his eyes and nodded. Woo-woo. Don't. Jingyu wanted to cry, but no tears came out. It's fine if you're just going to send me to school, but you're going to lock me up. Jingyu. I suspect that someone is plotting this behind the scenes. Xiao Chen's expression was somewhat grave. He frowned at Jingyu and said, You must be very careful in the academy. What do you mean? Jingyu's heart trembled slightly, and her expression slowly darkened. She frowned as she looked at Xiao Chun and asked, This matter came out of the blue, and I'm afraid that someone will do something to harm you. Xiao Chun frowned slightly in annoyance and said, Don't worry, if there is even the slightest movement, I will definitely bring you out unharmed even if I have to flatten the academy. Jingyu's heart trembled slightly, and her expression changed. She frowned at Xiao Chun and said, Is there any movement from the Crown Prince and the Second Prince? It's fine. I'll take care of it. Xiao Chun glanced at Jingyu indifferently and didn't say anything else. After telling Jingyu to be at ease, he turned and left. Jingyu's heart was not calm. She had already expected this. Xiao Chun was a member of the imperial family, and this was a matter for the imperial family. Chapter 131. However, Jingyu's heart was not calm. She had already thought that this would happen. Xiao Chun was a member of the imperial family, so this was a matter of the imperial family. Forget it. Xiao Chun would handle it himself. Jingyu shook off the messy thoughts in her mind and lowered her head to look at the booklet in her hand. A cold light flashed in her eyes. If this was specifically targeted at her, then the following month would not be peaceful at all. However, did they really think that she, Jingyu, was a soft persimmon that anyone could bully? Humph, let them go. Jingyu smiled happily and threw the booklet to one side. She continued to look for Xing Er to discuss the matter of building a house. During this period of time, Jingyu went to a few sites, but she was unable to find one that she was satisfied with. This made Jingyu very worried. Yin Xiao, why did you bring so many clothes and accessories? Jingyu's mouth twitched as she looked at Yin Xiao's chest full of clothes and accessories. She was instantly at a loss. Imperial concubine, you naturally have to bring more accessories and clothes in the academy. Otherwise, you will be outshined by others. Yin Xiao said seriously. Aya, Don't be so busy. Jingyu saw that Yin Xiao was still pretending and instantly rushed over to take out the things inside. She picked 3 or 4 sets of clothes that she liked and placed them there. However, she threw all the accessories to one side. Imperial concubine. Yin Xiao looked at Jingyu's actions and instantly pouted her lips in grievance. Go get those storybooks. If you have nothing to do, you can read them to pass the time. Jingyu directed Yin Xiao and said, also, don't keep calling me Imperial concubine. Xiao Chun and I are not married yet. Then let's call you Quasi-Imperial concubine, Yin Xiao said as she took the book. Is there a difference? Jingyu's hand paused slightly as she asked speechlessly. Jingyu looked at the box filled with items and a bag of silver before nodding her head in satisfaction. Bribery should be useful these days. Perhaps the money could be used here. Jingyu stroked her chin and walked around the room to make sure she didn't miss anything. Oh, right. Jingyu clapped her hands as she thought of something. Xing'er. Jingyu turned around and shouted towards the door. What orders does Imperial concubine have? Xing'er turned around and bowed slightly towards Jingyu. Go and ask Xiao Chun if he has any handy weapons, such as a short knife or dagger. I'll bring them with me for self-defense. Jingyu looked at Xing'er and said. Xing'er paused slightly when he heard this. He looked at Jingyu before bowing and walking out. Ayaya, I'm going to the prison tomorrow, Jingyu said as she lay on the bed. Imperial concubine, we're going to the academy, not the prison. She was tidying up the clothes that had been messed up when she heard Jingyu's words. She frowned and replied, What's the difference? It's all about locking people up. Jingyu mumbled. She took off her shoes and climbed onto the bed. She laid down comfortably on the bed and prepared to rest. Yin Xiao tidied up the things and went downstairs. Jingyu was half asleep when she heard a strange sound beside her. Jingyu turned around unhappily and continued to sleep. However, she felt something close to her. A pair of hands lifted her head, and then she felt her head resting on something hard. Jingyu opened her hazy eyes uncomfortably. The first thing she saw was Xiao Qin's handsome face that looked slightly tired. Xiao Chun, it's you? Jingyu's voice was filled with sleepiness. She mumbled and closed her eyes again. Chapter 132. Xiao Chun, it's you? Jingyu's voice was filled with sleepiness as she mumbled and closed her eyes again. Did I wake you up? Xiao Qin asked as he lifted his hand to caress Jingyu's cheek. No. Jingyu replied drowsily with her eyes closed. I can't give it to you tomorrow. Xing'er told me you wanted a dagger, so this is for you. Xiao Qin's expression softened slightly as he brought the dagger in his hand to Jingyu. Jingyu frowned as she looked at the pitch-black dagger, feeling helpless. Black. Black again. Jingyu felt numb as she silently took the dagger from Xiao Qin's hand and slowly pulled it out. The cold gleam of the blade made Jingyu's entire body tremble. She narrowed her eyes as she raised her hand to caress the blade. Suddenly, she looked at Xiao Qin excitedly and said, Good dagger. Where did you get it? When have I ever given you anything bad? Xiao Qin smiled as he looked at Jingyu's happy expression. It's really not bad. The weight is just right. Jingyu nodded her head in satisfaction. As long as you like it. Xiao Qin looked at Jingyu's expression as she couldn't bear to let go of the dagger. He raised his eyebrows slightly and took it from her. He put it to the side and said calmly, Stop playing with it. You're going to sleep now. Jingyu pouted unhappily as she watched Xiao Qin take the dagger away. But when she thought about how she would be able to carry it with her tomorrow, she was satisfied. She slowly lay down and closed her eyes as though she was about to fall asleep. Suddenly, she opened her eyes as though she had thought of something. What are you going to do tomorrow? Why can't you give it to me? Jingyu frowned as she looked at Xiao Qin beside her. She had no idea that her words carried a hint of resentment and questioning. I have something to do. Xiao Qin was slightly taken aback. He hugged Jingyu and said, I will definitely pick you up when you come back. Oh, it's nothing. I was just asking. Jingyu replied calmly. This time, she really closed her eyes and went asleep. When she opened her eyes again, it was already morning. Xiao Qin was indeed nowhere to be seen. The person in charge of sending Jingyu to the school was Xing'er. When they arrived at the school, they saw that all the ladies were starting to move their things inside. Jingyu silently turned her head and saw that she only had one box. She was speechless. Was she planning to move the entire house? Jingyu. Shangguan Linglan happily waved her hand and walked over. You are all here. Jingyu also smiled. When she was about to talk to Shangguan Linglan, she saw the things that had been moved inside being carried out. Suddenly, they all widened their eyes in confusion, not knowing what was going on. Mother Yun said that all the clothes must be checked before entering. Your clothes will be temporarily kept by the school. The school will distribute clothes for the ladies to wear during this month. The cold-faced Mother Yun stood in front of the door and looked at them indifferently. After she finished speaking, everyone was stunned. After so long, did she mean that they only needed to bring people? They didn't need to bring anything? Haha. Fortunately, I didn't bring much. Shangguan Linglan laughed happily. Jingyu also had a complacent look. When they finally entered the school, only some books, money, and jewelry were left. Everything else was confiscated. The ladies complained, but Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan were calm. Then, Jingyu wore the legendary school uniform for the first time in this strange world. Chapter 133. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan were calm. Then, Jingyu put on the legendary school uniform for the first time in this alternate world. The blue and white stripes were simple and elegant. After everyone put on the uniform, they couldn't help but look dignified. However, why is this uniform a tube top? Jingyu wanted to cry but had no tears to shed as she looked at her flat chest. Her heart was filled with grief. Ning Shengyuan was also very helpless. Jingyu silently turned her head to look at Ning Shengyuan's bulging chest. The difference was too big. Yuan, go away. I don't want to stand with you. Jingyu roared at Ning Shengyuan with a face full of accusation. I don't know why it's like this. Ning Shengyuan's cheeks were slightly red as she looked uneasily at Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan looked at each other and sighed helplessly. Suddenly, they calmed down and silently sighed, accepting this fact that they couldn't ignore. When the rooms were allocated, the three of them shared a room and moved into the school. Jingyu, Shangguan Linglan, and the other two naturally lived together as a matter of course. This group of people living together was very lively. The entire courtyard was filled with the sound of laughter. However, this laughter did not last long because the legendary training had finally arrived. The level of this training was simply many times more severe than in the past. Yeah, hurry up and massage me. It had only been a short 3 days, but most of them were already lying on the ground in exhaustion. Their feet were trembling from the training. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan looked like they were about to collapse, not to mention Ning Shengyuan and the other young ladies who had never suffered before. At this pace, how many of us can withstand it? Jingyu said as she massaged Ning Shengyuan's legs. I will definitely endure it. Ning Shengyuan gritted her teeth and said, Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan were slightly stunned. Sure enough, I can't ignore a woman's explosive power. Jingyu shrugged nonchalantly. For Jingyu, who had undergone more rigorous training, this was a piece of cake. As for Shangguan Linglan, who had grown up in the military, it was needless to say. Jingyu and Ning Shengyuan got along very well, but the people in the other rooms didn't feel the same way. After class, Jingyu and Ning Shengyuan sat in the room and had tea and snacks. Suddenly, they heard a loud noise coming from the room next door. You were the last one to leave the house. If it wasn't you who stole my bracelet, who else could it be? A slightly shrill voice was heard, successfully attracting the attention of Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan. Everyone looked over and saw that it was the room where they were staying. I didn't. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan looked at each other, stood up, and walked over. They saw the people pointing at the door and frowned slightly. They looked inside and saw Lu Miaoqiu sitting on the ground and Dong Si glaring at Lu Miaoqiu with her hands on her hips. You still dare to quibble. Dong Si's eyes were full of coldness. She stared at Lu Miaoqiu and said, Then why didn't you open the box for me to check? I. Lu Miaoqiu's face turned red, but she couldn't say a word. What? Can't say anything? Dong Si sneered at Lu Miaoqiu and said, I think you have a guilty conscience. Chapter 134. What? Can't say anything? Dong Si sneered at Lu Miaoqiu and said, I think you have a guilty conscience. I didn't take your things. Lu Miaoqiu's voice was as soft as a mosquito's foot. Compared to Dong Si's confidence, her explanation was even more feeble and powerless. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan's mouths twitched silently as they watched from the outside. Okay, then let me open the box to see if you took it or not. Dong Si said as she walked into the room and carried the box out. Lu Miaoqiu's expression changed drastically when she saw the box being carried out. She hurriedly stood up and pounced over. Don't touch my things. Lu Miaoqiu hugged the box tightly and looked at Dong Si in horror. Get out of my way. When Dong Si saw Lu Miaoqiu's expression, she was even more certain that Lu Miaoqiu had taken her things. She rushed forward and pushed Lu Miaoqiu aside. She kicked the box forcefully and all the things in the box spilled out. Everyone looked at the box that had been kicked to the ground in shock. The contents of the box had all been poured out. The shattered inkstone and the spilled ink had completely dyed the box of paintings black. However, there was nothing else in the box other than the paintings. Lu Miaoqiu screamed and hurriedly went forward to pick up the paintings. Large drops of tears fell from her eyes, and for a moment, she was sobbing uncontrollably. The way she touched the paintings made Jingyu feel sorry for her. How can there be nothing? That's strange. Dong Si flipped through the paintings without any pity. She glared at Lu Miaoqiu and said, Did you hide it somewhere else? Tell me. Lu Miaoqiu just kept crying and didn't say anything. Shangguan Linglan finally couldn't stand it anymore. He pushed aside the people in front of him and strode in front of Dong Si and said loudly, Miss Dong, have you caused enough trouble? Miss Shangguan, I'm just asking where my bracelet is. Dong Si saw that the person who stood out was Shangguan Linglan. She restrained herself and stopped searching, but she still looked unyielding. Your bracelet is important, but other people's things aren't important? Shangguan Linglan sneered and looked at Dong Si and said, Furthermore, you didn't find the bracelet in her box. Maybe this is just an excuse you made up to make things difficult for Miss Lu. Who knows if she hid it somewhere else? Shangguan Linglan's words. Dong Erza's face was flushed red and she retorted angrily, That's good. Shangguan Linglan sneered. He turned around and squatted down beside Lu Miaoqiu. He looked straight at Lu Miaoqiu and said, Tell me, did you take her things? I didn't. Lu Miaoqiu looked at Shangguan Linglan nervously and said, Then do you dare to let her search? If she can't find anything, I will make the decision for you. Shangguan Linglan looked at Lu Miaoqiu with a firm face and said. Lu Miaoqiu seemed to be frightened by Shangguan Linglan's actions. She probably didn't expect that someone would stand up for her at this time. Okay. Lu Miaoqiu's eyes were full of gratitude, and she responded in a low voice. Since you want to find it, then let's search. Shangguan Linglan smiled at Lu Miaoqiu to appease her. He turned to look at Dong Si and said, But if you can't find it, Miss Dong has to explain the books on the ground. I'd like to see what you will say to Mother Yun when you see a girl who indiscriminately makes things difficult for her classmate. Chapter 135. But if you can't find it, Miss Dong, you have to explain for the books on the ground. You are a miss who indiscriminately embarrasses her classmate. I'd like to see what you will say to Mother Yun when you see her. You. Dong Si's face suddenly turned pale. She snorted coldly and turned around to search Lu Miaoqiu's bed and clothes. After searching for a while, she didn't find anything. Dong Si's expression became uglier and uglier. Finally, she focused her gaze on Lu Miaoqiu. I think you hid it on your body, Dong Si said as she walked up to Lu Miaoqiu's clothes. The corner of Jingyu's mouth twitched. She stepped in front of Dong Si and looked at the woman from the corner of her eyes. She said indifferently, Why are you so sure that she stole your things? Did you see it? Get out of the way. She must have hidden it on her body, Dong Si said as she looked at Jingyu who was standing in front of her. Miss Dong, could it be that you dropped it and couldn't find it? So you wrongly accused someone else and wanted to kick Miss Lu out of the academy? Jingyu yawned in boredom and said, Miss Dong, I think you'd better look for your closet, under your bed, and in front of your dressing table. Impossible. I put it on my dressing table. It disappeared when I came back. Dong Xier denied it. How would you know if you don't look for it? Jingyu rolled her eyes. She squatted down to help Lu Miaoqiu pick up the things scattered on the floor. She said indifferently, or let everyone look together. That's fair. That's right. Ning Xiangyuan also stood up, completely ignoring Dong Xier's changed expression. She beckoned everyone into the house. Jing Yin, who was at the side, saw everyone's actions and was pushed away before she could even say anything to stop them. A trace of anger flashed through Jing Yan's eyes. She looked at Jingyu, who was squatting on the floor and picking up things. Just as she was about to say something, the people in the room moved and attracted everyone's attention. The woman in the lead walked out with a bracelet in her hand and said, "Miss Dong, is this your bracelet?" "Aya, it really is my bracelet. Where did you find it?" Dong Xier's eyes flashed with surprise as she looked at the woman and asked, "You found it under your own bed." Ning Shengyuan stepped forward, looked at Dong Xier and said, "Now, do you have anything to say, Miss Dong? Since the bracelet has been found, then let's just forget about this matter." Dong Xier wore the bracelet on her wrist like it was a treasure. When she heard Ning Shengyuan's question, she paused slightly and raised her chin. "Forget it?" Jingyu stood up and looked Dong Xier up and down. She said, "It's easy for you to say that. Then how do you explain the fact that you wrongly accused Miss Lu? What about the things on the ground?" "It's just some lousy books. How much are they worth?" "I'll pay for them," Dong Xier said disdainfully. "All right, then I'll burn all of your things now. They're not worth much anyway." Jingyu crossed her arms and laughed. The words she spat out were extremely arrogant. You dare." Dong Xier's expression changed, and she glared at Jingyu. "Why wouldn't I dare?" Jingyu smiled disdainfully. "I think we should ask Mother Yun to speak." Shangguan Linglan helped Lu Miaoqiu put the things back into the box. He stood up and said, "If everyone is like you, Miss Dong, insulting others indiscriminately, I don't think we can stay in the academy anymore." Chapter 136. Forget it. Forget it. Lu Miaoqiu stood up. When she heard that Shangguan Linglan was going to report to Mother Yun, her eyes were filled with horror as she spoke. "Humph," she said, "forget it. Why are you meddling in other people's business?" Dong Xier's eyes flashed with complacency. She glanced at Jingyu and the others indifferently, raised her chin, and turned to enter the room. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan's faces were livid. They turned around and looked at Lu Miaoqiu with disappointment. They could have taken this opportunity to severely suppress Dong Xier, but they had become meddlers in other people's business. I'm sorry to implicate you." Lu Miaoqiu's cheeks were faintly stained with tears. She carefully looked at Jingyu and the others and said, "Oh my God, I'm defeated by you." Jingyu sighed with her hand on her forehead. She turned around and walked into the courtyard. Ning Shengyuan's face was full of sympathy. She watched Lu Miaoqiu struggle to carry the box into the room, then turned around and sat back down with Jingyu. "Tell me, what is this?" Jingyu angrily took a sip of tea from the table and said, "Originally, Jingyu thought that Lu Miaoqiu had helped her when Jingyu fell into the water last time. She wanted to take this opportunity to vent her anger for her, but it turned out to be like this." "Jingyu, don't blame Lu Miaoqiu. It's no wonder that she tolerates her family's situation." Shangguan Linglan helplessly sighed and said, "Her family? What's wrong with her family?" Jingyu slightly paused her action of drinking tea. She blinked and looked at Shangguan Linglan and asked, "I know a little about this." Ning Shengyuan slowly opened her mouth and said, "Lu Miaoqiu is a concubine's daughter. She was not like this when her mother was alive. At that time, her mother doted on her very much. Although she was a concubine's daughter, she lived like a legitimate daughter." Jingyu knew a little about the distinction between legitimate and concubine, so she blinked and looked at Ning Shengyuan in confusion and asked, "Then why did she become like this?" "This situation became like this after her mother passed away 2 years ago." Ning Shengyuan slightly sighed and said, "It's normal for the legal wife to suppress a concubine's daughter. Without her mother's protection, she lived like a servant in the Lu's house. Master Lu didn't care about the matters in the backyard, so over time it became like this." So that's how it is. Looking at how precious she was with those paintings. What is that? Jingyu frowned. Lu Miaoqiu's mother was a talented woman who was famous throughout the imperial city. Those paintings were all made by her mother. She must have missed her mother dearly, so she always kept the paintings with her. She didn't expect today's incident to happen. Ning Xiangyuan shook her head and sighed. If that's the case, then we can't let Dong see or get away with it. Jingyu glared. Yeah, she is only a concubine's daughter. If she can force Dong see or out of the school, what will she do in the future? Will she hide somewhere and never see anyone again? Ning Xiangyuan shook her head and said, This? Jingyu furrowed her brows tightly. Why was it so tiring to be a person? Forget it. In the future, I'll help her as much as I can in this school. Shangguan Linglan was also helpless. She knew a little about Lu Miaoqiu, but she didn't know that Lu Miaoqiu was living such a difficult life now. If she continues to live with Dong Seer, she will definitely be bullied everywhere. Let's go and talk to Mother Yun and let her live with us in the bed. Jingyu pursed her lips and said. As soon as she finished speaking, Ning Xiangyuan and Shangguan Linglan's eyes lit up and they both nodded. Chapter 137. If she continues to live with Dong Seer and the others, she will definitely be bullied. Let's go talk to Mother Yun and have her move in with us. Jingyu pursed her lips as she spoke. As soon as she finished speaking, Ning Xiangyuan and Shangguan Linglan's eyes lit up and they nodded in unison. Afterwards, the three of them went to find Mother Yun. They only said that they wanted to get closer to the young lady of the Lu family and said some nice things and gave her some money. Mother Yun naturally agreed. It was just moving a bed, so it wouldn't have much of an impact. Immediately, the three of them went to move all of Lu Miaoqiu's things out. It's good that she moved out. It'll save me the trouble of seeing her. Dong Seer sat to the side and coldly spat out these words as she watched Jingyu and the others help Lu Miaoqiu move her things. Only Miss Jing Yin is merciful enough to allow someone like you to live with her. Who knows if you'll do the same thing again? We can't afford it. Jingyu hugged Lu Miaoqiu's pile of clothes and sneered as she turned to leave. Hee. I really admire Miss Jing Yan's merciful heart. Shangguan Linglan hugged the bedding and coldly laughed. His mocking words caused the expressions of the two people in the room to change. You. Dong Seer's face alternated between green and white as she watched Jingyu, Shangguan Linglan, and the others leave. She fiercely slammed the table in her hands with a face full of anger. Look at what you've done. Jing Yin slowly picked up her tea and took a sip. She coldly looked at Dong Seer and spoke. Jing Yin, I didn't do it on purpose. Dong Seer looked at Jing Yan's cold expression and lowered her head in fear as she spoke in a small voice. Don't look for trouble in the future. She slowly stood up and looked at Dong Seer from the corner of her eyes. I think that Miss Lu really wants to move in. Go and invite her over. You'll have a chance to get close to her. Jing Yu and Shangguan Linglan enthusiastically helped Lu Miaoqiu. Their enthusiasm made Lu Miaoqiu feel particularly flattered. She thought that she was already very grateful to them for speaking up for her. She didn't expect that they would even bring her over. You. From now on, stay here properly. If anyone dares to bully you again, I will break their legs. Shangguan Linglan said as he patted Lu Miaoqiu's shoulder. Aya, young lady Shangguan, your hand is really strong. Lu Miaoqiu trembled from Shangguan Linglan's slap as she looked at Shangguan Linglan with a red face. Shangguan Linglan was slightly stunned as she looked at her hand. Ha, don't mind her. She's just a rough person. Jingyu looked at this scene and laughed unrestrainedly. Jingyu. Shangguan Linglan turned around with a sullen face and stared at Jingyu with a murderous look. How dare you call me a rough person? How dare you? Rough person. Come and hit me if you dare. Jingyu quickly fled as if there was oil under her feet. See if I don't beat you to death. Shangguan Linglan chased after her angrily. Aya, are they okay? Lu Miaoqiu looked worriedly at the two people who ran out. There was a faint look of guilt on her face as she thought that she had done something wrong. Don't worry, they're like this every day. You'll get used to it. Ning Xiangyuan listened to Lu Miaoqiu's words and smiled as she comforted her. You guys have such a good relationship. Lu Miaoqiu's words were filled with envy as she turned around and walked to the side to pack her things. In the dead of night, everyone dragged their tired bodies into the house. After a day of training, everyone was exhausted. At this moment, they were carrying their things to the bathhouse to wash themselves. Speaking of the bathhouse, it was probably the place that Jingyu was most satisfied with. Chapter 138. In the dead of the night, everyone dragged their tired bodies into the house. After a day of training, everyone was exhausted. At this moment, they were carrying their things to the bathhouse to take a bath. Speaking of the bathhouse, it was probably the place that Jingyu was most satisfied with. The bathhouse was divided into many rooms, and it wasn't a place for many people to bathe together. When Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan arrived, the room next door was already full of people. They looked around and found an extra one. Ah, it's so comfortable. Jingyu comfortably soaked herself in the bathtub and squinted her eyes. The bathhouse was separated by a wooden screen, and people next door could talk to each other. Shangguan Linglan, Ning Shangyuan, and the others were sitting side by side, and the four of them were talking, so they could hear each other. Be careful, don't drown, Shangguan Linglan said indifferently as he played with the water. Do you think everyone is like you? Drowning? Jingyu said sarcastically without holding back. This lady is very good at swimming. Haha, let's have a competition next time. Shangguan Linglan said loudly, unconvinced. Let's have a competition. Jingyu didn't back down. Ning Shangyuan helplessly comforted her, and Lu Miaoqiu also interjected from time to time. For a moment, the bathhouse was very lively. However, no one noticed that a pair of bare feet had silently stepped in. She slowly squatted down and took out a bamboo tube from behind her. She raised her head and revealed her true appearance under the illumination of the candlelight. Her pure and beautiful face was filled with coldness at this moment. As she listened to the laughter of Jingyu and the others, her heart was filled with resentment. Laugh, laugh all you want. You'll be screaming in a moment. A trace of disdain flashed across the corner of Jing Yan's mouth. She slowly opened the bamboo tube in her hand, and a colorful snake quickly slithered out. The snake hissed as it slithered across the floor. Go have fun. Jing Yan stood up and watched as the snake slithered towards where Jingyu and the others had made the sound. She smiled smugly and turned to leave the bathhouse. Big sister Jing Yan, this won't be a problem, right? Dong Si'er, who had been waiting outside, hurried over and asked worriedly, What are you afraid of? It's not a venomous snake. Jing Yan rolled her eyes indifferently and said, They've been arrogant enough these days. I just want to teach them a lesson. Yes, yes, yes. Dong Si'er was relieved when she heard that it wasn't a poisonous snake. If someone died because of this, it would be a huge crime that would implicate the entire family. Go and call all the sisters over to watch the fun. Who knows, we might even be able to see a picture of a beauty coming out of the bath. Jing Yan laughed mockingly as a faint smile appeared on her pure face. She tilted her head and spoke to Dong Si'er. Jingyu and the others were happily chatting. Ning Shangyuan raised her hand to grab the corner of the incense. However, when she reached out, she suddenly saw the snake's head sticking out its red tongue and staring at her with its bloody mouth wide open. Ning Shangyuan immediately screamed, Ah! What's wrong? Ning Shangyuan's panic scream startled Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan. They grabbed their clothes and rushed out of the bathroom. They immediately saw the person sitting on the floor with only a thin layer of clothing covering her body. She pointed inside the bathroom with a terrified expression. Snake! There's a snake! Ning Shangyuan was so frightened that her face turned pale. Jingyu's expression turned cold as she turned to look. Indeed, she saw the snake swimming in the bathtub. Chapter 139. Snake! There's a snake! Ning Shangyuan's face turned pale with fright. Jingyu's expression turned cold as she turned her head to look. Sure enough, she saw the snake swimming in the bathtub. So it's a small snake. Jingyu walked over without a change in her expression. She casually reached out and grabbed the snake swimming in the bathtub. This action shocked Ning Shangyuan and Shangguan Linglan. Although Shangguan Linglan wasn't afraid of this thing, she didn't dare to reach out and grab it. She only dared to beat it to death. She didn't expect Jingyu to be so bold as to reach out and grab it without any hesitation. Lu Miaoqiu was so scared that her face turned pale, and she looked like she was about to collapse. You dare to run amok in my territory? I think you're having fun. Jingyu pinched the snake's 7 inches and her eyes were filled with threat. The little snake was so scared that it didn't dare to move. It looked at Jingyu pitifully. It really didn't know that Jingyu was here. If it had known, it wouldn't have dared to scare her no matter what. Jingyu, you should just kill it. Shangguan Linglan saw that Jingyu was actually speaking to the snake, and their expressions turned strange. Shangguan Linglan said, "It's quite scary when you're holding it in your hand." "It's fine." Jingyu released the snake's hand, and the snake didn't dare to move. It softly wrapped around Jingyu's hand and looked very obedient. Shangguan Linglan and the others were shocked. "It won't bite." Jingyu opened her mouth and said, "This snake doesn't look poisonous." As Jingyu spoke, she actually stretched out her hand to pry open the snake's mouth. Immediately, Shangguan Linglan was scared stiff. She looked at Jingyu in horror. This wasn't the way to court death. "Open your mouth." Jingyu narrowed her eyes at the snake that had its mouth shut and said with dissatisfaction. The little snake quivered and slowly opened its mouth. It looked at Jingyu's hand touching its fangs, but it didn't bite down. Shangguan Linglan and Ning Xiangyuan were scared witless. Jingyu withdrew her hand and wiped it on her clothes in disgust. She said, "It doesn't look poisonous, but it has a bright red line on its belly. It's really strange. I don't remember seeing this kind of snake." Jingyu frowned in confusion. She thought carefully about the snake species in her memories from her previous life. Indeed, there was no record of this kind of snake. It looked like an ordinary non-poisonous flower snake, but the red line was strangely tight. "Don't touch it. Why would there be a snake in such a nice bathhouse?" Shangguan Linglan helped Ning Xiangyuan up and said, "Is there a need to guess? Someone obviously let it in." Jingyu played with the snake in her hand and said indifferently, "Put on your clothes. I'm guessing there must be a lot of people outside waiting to see us make a fool of ourselves." "What? Someone let it in?" Shangguan Linglan's face turned cold. He glared and said, "Who would dare to do that? Why would they let this snake in? We didn't offend anyone recently. You and I were in the limelight at school. Naturally, there were people who couldn't stand it. They wanted to take us down a notch and take us down a notch." Jingyu rolled her eyes and said, "Since that's the case, how can we do nothing? Cooperate with me and put on a show." "What show?" The 3 of them were puzzled. Outside the bathhouse, everyone heard the scream and gathered. They stood outside the door, their eyes full of confusion. Chapter 140. Outside the bathhouse, everyone heard the sudden shriek and gathered around. They all stood outside the door, their eyes filled with confusion. Why is there no sound after a short shriek? Could something have happened? Should we go in and take a look? A young lady from an official's family asked with a frown, her eyes filled with worry. "I don't think so. What could possibly happen in this school?" Jing Yan's eyes were filled with confusion. Could it be that she had fainted from fright? Otherwise, why would there be no sound for so long? She turned to look at the group of young ladies behind her. Another shriek rang out. This time, they heard it clearly. Everyone's hearts trembled as they hurriedly looked over. "Aya, there's a snake." Just as everyone looked over, a figure rushed out in a panic. They didn't know what she was holding, but she threw it straight out. Everyone looked over and saw that the person who had rushed out was Jingyu. The thing she had thrown out was actually a snake. Jingyu was clearly scared out of her wits. The snake actually landed on Jing Yan, who was standing at the side. What is that?" Jing Yan stood motionless at the side. However, just as she looked over at Jingyu, she saw the thing that was thrown straight at her. She immediately felt a chill on her neck, as if something had burrowed its way into her neck. A snake burrowed its way into your clothes." Dong Si-er, who was standing beside Jing Yan, saw the little snake burrow its way into Jing Yan's clothes. Her beautiful face instantly turned pale as she screamed in horror. No. Hurry up and help me get it out." Jing Yan's expression changed drastically. She felt something moving around in her clothes and was so frightened that she almost cried. "Hurry! Take off your clothes!" Someone shouted in the midst of the chaos. Instantly, as if she had found a savior, Jing Yin reached out to take off her clothes without any hesitation. "Everyone, hurry up and help." At the call, everyone went forward to help Jing Yin take off her clothes. In the chaos, Jing Yin didn't feel her clothes being taken off, but she felt a scratching pain on her body. Clearly, someone had taken the opportunity to cause trouble. "It's running away." The snake escaped. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they heard that. However, some of the more timid ones looked at their feet in fear, afraid that the snake would come out again. When everyone turned to look at Jingyu, they were shocked by her disheveled clothes and disheveled hair. She was sitting on the ground weakly and did not look beautiful at all. She looked as if she had just been humiliated. The eyes of the young ladies faintly revealed a mocking expression. To be able to see the young lady of the Prime Minister's manner like this, it was also an interesting matter. Presumably, the remaining days would not be boring, and everyone had more things to talk about after meals. Jing Yan's face was burning with shame and anger. She raised her head to look at Jingyu and the others. They were all neatly dressed and did not look panicked at all. It was obvious that they had done this deliberately. However, Jing Yin could not blame them at all because she had released the snake herself. If Mother Yun found out, she was afraid that she would be expelled from the academy again. It was not easy for her grandfather to persuade Princess Royal to let her in. If she was expelled again, she would lose all her face. Chapter 141. It wasn't easy for her grandfather to persuade the eldest princess to let her in. If she went out again, she would lose all her face. Thank you sisters for today. I'll go back to my room first. Jing Yin let Dong Si help her up. She bowed to everyone with a dry smile and turned to leave. "Miss Jing Yin, be careful. This snake might be able to recognize smell. If it comes to find you tonight, you have to call us." Jingyu watched Jing Yin leave and loudly called out. As soon as she said that, Jing Yan's legs went soft and she almost fell to the ground. Jing Yin was clearly frightened by Jing Yu's words. That night, she reported this matter to Mother Yun. Mother Yun sent people to search the courtyard, but they couldn't find a trace of the snake. It probably ran out of the courtyard. She said a few words to reassure everyone and then left. Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan returned to the room. After closing the door, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. This scene was really satisfying. Ning Xiangyuan saw how frightened Jing Yin was and instantly forgot the fear in her heart. In an instant, the room was filled with laughter. "Jingyu, you're too amazing. Not only did you dare to catch the snake, but you also threw it so accurately. Look at how scared Jing Yin was. Her face was completely pale," Shangguan Linglan said to Jingyu with a face full of admiration. His voice was full of laughter. "Didn't I say that I grew up in the forest? I've caught snakes several times bigger than this. How could such a small snake scare me?" Jingyu proudly raised her chin and took a sip of the tea in her hand. "Haha, that's true." Shangguan Linglan laughed out loud. "We're lucky that Ye was here today. If it wasn't for you, we would have been embarrassed." Ning Xiangyuan looked at Jingyu gratefully and said, "If you didn't catch the snake, we definitely would have run out with our clothes in a mess. There would have been so many people outside to see us make a fool of ourselves." Humph. Why would so many young misses gather outside for no reason? Clearly, someone did it on purpose. Jingyu calmly put down her teacup and said, "But she deserves it. Jing Yin is going to suffer now." Shangguan Linglan grinned and said, "Let's see if Jing Yin dares to do anything to us again. If there's a next time, we'll definitely teach her a lesson. We'll make her avoid us in the future." "Oh, that's enough. Let's all sleep." Jingyu stood up and said, "We've really offended Jing Yin this time. We'll have fun in the future." Jingyu yawned and climbed into her bed. "Ah, then what should we do?" Lu Miaoqiu's face paled slightly as she asked, "What do you mean, what should we do?" Jingyu pulled the blanket over her and said, "Anyways, it's very boring in the academy. Let's just think of it as finding some fun for ourselves." "But she's the eldest young miss of the Prime Minister's estate." Lu Miaoqiu's eyes were filled with worry. I'm also the eldest young miss of the general's estate. Shangguan Linglan stood up and said, Miaoqiu, don't worry. With me and Jingyu here, she won't dare to bully you. That's right. Although my father's rank isn't high, he won't be easily bullied. Don't worry. Ning Shengyuan walked up and gently stroked the back of Lu Miaoqiu's hand. Lu Miaoqiu heard everyone's words and saw the sincerity in everyone's eyes. Her eyes immediately turned red. Chapter 142. Lu Miaoqiu had never thought that a concubine's daughter with no status or background would be able to receive such sincere protection from Jingyu and the others. Her close friends had all left her one after another because of her downfall. She no longer had the feelings of the past. Thank you all, Lu Miaoqiu said with a choked voice. The month-long closed-door training was about to end. Jingyu and the others had been fighting with Jingyu in the courtyard, but no one had gained much. Countess Xiling didn't want to be friends with Jingyu, nor did she want to help Jingyu. She seemed to be enjoying a good show, which surprised Jingyu. Countess Liang doesn't want to learn etiquette. So why does Countess Xiling? After class, Jingyu thought of a question that had puzzled her for a long time. She immediately looked at Shangguan Linglan and the others and asked, Aya, lower your voice. Ning Shengyuan's expression changed slightly when she heard this. She quickly covered Jingyu's mouth and looked around carefully. She glared at Jingyu and said, Why are you asking this? I wanted to ask a long time ago, but I forgot. Jingyu looked at Ning Shengyuan and the others' nervous expressions and knew that there was gossip here. Countess Liang and Countess Xiling both participated in etiquette classes last year. However, Countess Xiling didn't pass the exam last year. Ning Sheng lowered her body and whispered to Jingyu. There really was someone who didn't pass the exam? Jingyu asked with wide eyes. There are many people who didn't pass the exam, but as the eldest princess's daughter, Princess Xiling, not passing the exam is inconceivable. Back then, there was quite a storm because of this. You weren't in the imperial city at that time, so you don't know about it, Ning Shengyuan said slowly. At that time, Princess Liang and Princess Xiling were in a heated argument. Princess Xiling said that Liang deliberately framed her and caused her to fail the examination. At that time, Imperial concubine Fu was the examiner. After this incident, the eldest princess almost went to the emperor, Shangguan Linglan said. What happened after that? Jingyu widened her eyes in surprise and asked excitedly, as if she was listening to a story. After that, I don't know what happened, but the matter suddenly calmed down. The eldest princess didn't pursue the matter and had Countess Xiling take the exam again this year. However, Countess Xiling and Countess Liang are like fire and water. Every time they meet, they will definitely quarrel, Ning Shengyuan said faintly. How is it that no one in the imperial city dares to talk about such a big thing? Jingyu asked curiously. Who dares to talk about it? Shangguan Linglan leaned closer to Jingyu and said, at that time, it did become the topic of discussion. However, after the eldest princess came out of the palace, she immediately killed a few people who started the rumor in public. Killed people in public? Jingyu was shocked. Although she didn't know about the Tokyo law, no one in the modern world dared to kill people in public. Shuh. Lower your voice. Shangguan Linglan covered Jingyu's mouth and looked around to make sure no one was paying attention. Then, he turned to stare at Jingyu and said, the eldest princess killed people, but the emperor didn't do anything. He only sent a few guards to clean up the street. Oh my god, so domineering. Jingyu's eyes were full of admiration. Chapter 143. Jingyu looked around and moved to the side of the coffee table. She picked up the cold herbal tea and splashed it on Shangguan Linglan's face. Shangguan Linglan shuddered and finally opened his eyes slowly. Lan, get up. There's a fire. Jingyu hurried to Shangguan Linglan's side and said, What? Shangguan Linglan tried to sit up but found that his movements were very slow. His expression changed slightly and he asked, Why do I feel so weak? What's going on? You've been drugged. Jingyu walked towards Ning Shengyuan. Compared to Jingyu and Shangguan Linglan's bodies, Ning Shengyuan and Lu Miaoqiu's bodies were not faring so well. They had fallen into a deep sleep, and Jingyu was unable to wake them up. Lan, come here quickly. The fire is coming in. We have to carry them out. Jingyu called out to Shangguan Linglan. Shangguan Linglan struggled to support his body and looked down at his weak and trembling legs. A trace of anger flashed through his heart. Hurry! Jingyu struggled to move Ning Xiangyuan. She bit the tip of her tongue again and moved towards the door. Shangguan Linglan dragged Lu Miaoqiu towards the door. I can't open the door. What's going on? Jingyu had just reached the door when she realized that she couldn't open it at all. Cough, cough, cough. It's locked. Break it open. Shangguan Linglan coughed violently. Thick smoke billowed in the room. The fire had completely burned in. The fire on the wooden curtain was so big that Jingyu was shocked. How could such a big fire burn so fast? Hurry, break it open. Jingyu slammed the door with all her might, but the door didn't move an inch. Her strength was too weak. She breathed in more and more smoke and was starting to feel like she couldn't hold on any longer. Quick, go through the window. Jingyu turned and ran to the window, but the window couldn't be pushed open. Shangguan Linglan gritted his teeth and lifted the chair to smash the window. Jingyu hurriedly took the chair to smash the window as well. The noise outside was chaotic. They could faintly hear someone shouting the names of Jingyu and the others. Clang! The window was smashed open. Jingyu asked Shangguan Linglan to go out first, and then pushed Ning Xiangyuan and Lu Miaoqiu out. When the people outside saw people coming out, they quickly came to help. After Jingyu sent the two people out, she was about to climb out when she suddenly saw the pillar that had been burned down. Jingyu! Shangguan Linglan turned around and saw a pillar suddenly collapse in front of him. His face was pale, and he wanted to rush in without thinking, but he was pulled back by the people around him. Miss Shangguan, you can't go in. The fire is too big. Let go of me. Jingyu! Jingyu! Shangguan Linglan's eyes were red, and he rushed in with all his strength. The two people behind him hugged Shangguan Linglan's waist tightly. Damn you! Jingyu was inside and looked at the window that had been burned beyond recognition. How could she rush out when there was less and less space to stand? Jingyu hurriedly took out the handkerchief in her hand and poured tea to cover her mouth and nose. She turned her head to look at the blazing window. Just as she was about to rush out, her sharp eyes saw the small snake rolling on the ground. It looked like it was about to be cooked by the scorching temperature. The hissing sound it made was particularly miserable. Jingyu was shocked and hurriedly ran over to take the small snake in her hand. Chapter 144. Jingyu was shocked and hurriedly ran over to grab the little snake. Whether I live or die depends on whether I can get out of here. Jingyu looked at the little snake in her hand with a dejected expression. She gritted her teeth and looked at the window. She picked up the teapot beside her and flung it forcefully. The teapot hit the window and water splashed out, instantly extinguishing the fire. When the fire was extinguished, Jingyu used all her strength to jump out of the window. The moment Jingyu jumped out, the house behind Jingyu suddenly collapsed and fell into a sea of fire. Ah, it's on fire. Jingyu hurriedly rolled on the ground as soon as she landed. The fire on her skirt was finally extinguished. Jingyu! Jingyu! Everyone thought that there was no hope for Jingyu to save them, but they didn't expect that just as they had this thought, they suddenly saw a person rush out of the fire and roll in front of everyone's feet. When they saw the person clearly, Shangguan Linglan immediately rushed over. Jingyu! Jingyu, are you okay? Shangguan Linglan's eyes were big drops of tears as he hurriedly hugged Jingyu and asked, Cough, cough, cough. I'm fine. Jingyu's body hurt from rolling. Her skirt was burned by the fire and her feet were also burned. At this moment, the burning pain woke Jingyu up a little. You scared me to death. Shangguan Linglan started sobbing. Jingyu helplessly hugged Shangguan Linglan and said, I'm fine, Jingyu. Just as Jingyu was feeling a little dizzy, she suddenly heard an extremely familiar voice. Jingyu was slightly stunned. She sat on the ground and turned her head to look. She saw a man anxiously walking towards her under the light of the fire in the dark night. Xiaochun, why are you? Jingyu blinked and was about to ask when Xiaochun suddenly squatted beside her. His pitch-black eyes were filled with fear as he carefully looked at Jingyu. When Jingyu didn't react, he pulled her into his embrace. Xiaochun. Jingyu was shocked. She was so dirty, but Xiao Qin actually hugged her. Sorry, I'm late, Xiao Qin said as he hugged Jingyu tightly. It's okay. I'm fine. Jingyu was a little nervous when Xiao Qin acted like this. Xiao Qin carefully looked at Jingyu. In the end, when Jingyu was unprepared, he carried her up. Jingyu was so frightened that she quickly hugged Xiao Qin's neck. She looked at Xiao Qin's side profile in surprise. There were so many people here, but he actually carried her like this. Shangguanmin Hao, I'll leave the rest to you. Xiao Qin turned around and said to a general in armor. Jingyu was slightly stunned. Wasn't this man Shangguan Linglin's third brother? Yes. Shangguan Minhao's expression changed slightly as he looked at Jingyu in Xiao Qin's arms. In the end, he bowed his head and agreed. Jingyu saw that a large group of soldiers had already brought the fire under control and were trying their best to extinguish it. When she saw that Xiao Chan was about to leave, she hurriedly looked at Shangguan Linglan. Shangguan Linglan waved at Jingyu, indicating that she didn't need to worry. Jingyu heaved a sigh of relief and turned around to look for Ning Xiangyuan and Lu Miaoqiu. When she turned around, she saw that Ning Xiangyuan was looking at her. Seeing that Ning Xiangyuan had woken up, Jingyu finally felt relieved. She smiled at Ning Xiangyuan, but strangely, Ning Xiangyuan didn't show any expression at all. It was as if she didn't see Jingyu smile. Chapter 145. Jingyu was slightly startled and looked strangely at Ning Xiang. Xiao Chun had already walked past Ning Xiangyuan and carried Jingyu out of the academy. Jingyu frowned. She thought that Ning Xiangyuan had probably just woken up and hadn't noticed. Thinking of this, Jingyu felt the strange feeling in her heart dissipate. Ouch! Ouch, ouch, ouch! Xiao Chun carried Jingyu onto the carriage and accidentally touched the burn on her foot. Jingyu immediately cried out in pain. Xiao Qin's body stiffened. He carefully lifted Jingyu's foot and looked at the burned skin. His face immediately darkened, and his chest heaved up and down as if it would explode at any moment. Jingyu, who had just sat down, was frightened. Xiao Chun, this fire was set by someone. Jingyu pursed her lips and said, I know. Xiao Chun sat down and urged the servants outside before heading to the prince's mansion. You know? Jingyu was slightly shocked. She looked up at Xiao Chun in astonishment and said, You know who set the fire? I haven't found out who it was yet, but I already guessed when I received news that someone wanted to harm you. I didn't think that I would still be a step too late. Xiao Chen's eyes were faintly filled with guilt as he said this to Jingyu. Damn it, are these people done yet? Jingyu's eyes flashed with anger. She looked at the wound on her ankle and said, It's my fault for being too careless. I didn't think that the other party would drug me and want to kill me. Don't worry, I will find out who is behind this. Xiao Chun took a deep breath and said in a low voice, If I find out who is behind this, I will skin him alive. Jingyu said coldly, You'd better think about what to do with your skin first. Xiao Chun looked at the rejuvenated Jingyu with a faint smile in his eyes. He pointed at the burn on Jingyu's leg and asked, Xiao Chun, you're so powerful. You must have a way to restore it to its original state, right? Jingyu looked at Xiao Chun expectantly. Her blinking eyes made Xiao Chun feel good. How could he not be happy to be praised by his own woman? It won't be a problem for me to recover, Xiao Chun said with a faint smile. I knew that you would be able to do it. Jingyu's eyes lit up as she beamed at Xiao Chun. But, Xiao Chun said faintly, causing the smile on Jingyu's face to freeze. But what? Jingyu asked while blinking her eyes. But you have to take the etiquette test on the 5th day of the Lunar New Year. How are you going to take the test with your leg in this state? Xiao Chun squinted at Jingyu and said, Aya. Jingyu suddenly widened her eyes. Only then did she remember that the etiquette test was on the 5th day of the Lunar New Year. Jingyu rolled her eyes and said, Xiao Chun, you're so powerful. You must be able to cure it in 5 days, right? You're thinking too much. Xiao Chun leaned back and said, Even if Miracle Dr. Gue Gu were to treat you personally, you wouldn't be able to recover in 5 days. Jingyu was instantly depressed. She looked at Xiao Chun bitterly and said, Then what should I do? Take the test in the second half of the year. Xiao Chun replied casually. No. Jingyu looked like she was about to stomp her feet. She stared at Xiao Chan and said, It's torture for me to stay in that godforsaken place for a day. You still want me to stay there for half a year? You're asking for my life. Chapter 146. Staying in that damned place for even a single day was torture. You even made me stay for half a year. You're simply asking for my life. Xiao Chun looked at Jing Yu's angry appearance, and a trace of a smile appeared in his eyes. With such a big incident happening at the academy, I'm afraid that the etiquette exam won't be able to proceed before we find out the truth. Xiao Chun lazily leaned against the side of the carriage and said, "This king will send a memorial to the emperor to have him delay the exam and let you participate as promised." Really? The emperor will listen to you? Jing Yu's expression instantly changed, and she looked at Xiao Chun excitedly as she asked. Xiao Chun indifferently looked at Jing Yu and closed his eyes. What was the meaning of this? Jing Yu dazedly looked at Xiao Chun, who had closed his eyes, and suddenly felt her heart itch. I'm the one who's hurt, all right? I should be the one sleeping. Why is Xiao Chun like this, making it seem like I'm the one who's causing trouble for him? Jing Yu pouted as she looked at Xiao Chun. In the end, she also laid down to the side. She didn't know how she fell asleep, but she didn't have the slightest impression of how she got off the carriage and returned to the prince's estate. When Jing Yu slowly woke up, the only thing she felt was a cold sensation on her neck. Oh! Jing Yu slightly moved her body and opened her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, she was met with a pair of dark green snake eyes. Aya! Jing Yu cried out in surprise and suddenly sat up. The snake lying on her chest was also shaken and rolled to the ground. It raised its small head and looked at Jing Yu pitifully. Why are you here? Jing Yu widened her eyes and picked up the little snake. She raised it to her eyes and asked in confusion. She blinked and suddenly remembered that she seemed to have left the little fellow somewhere after she rushed out of the house last night. Could it be it got into her sleeve and followed her home? You little fellow, you're really sticking to this lady. Jing Yu pouted. After thinking about it, she put the snake down. Looking at the little snake coiled on the bed, she glared and said, "All right, since you have nowhere to go, then follow me." Hiss. As soon as Jing Yu finished speaking, the little snake happily stuck out its forked tongue and wriggled its body towards Jing Yu's wrist. That intimate look made the corners of Jing Yu's mouth curve up. However, there are two conditions. Jing Yu stretched out her finger to tease the little snake and said, "First, if you dare to wrap around this lady's neck while I'm sleeping, I'll cook you and eat you." Hiss. The little snake heard this and immediately lowered its body. Second, in the future, without my permission, you're not allowed to show your face in crowded places. If you cause me trouble, this lady will roast you. Jing Yu narrowed her eyes dangerously and looked at the snake wrapped around her wrist and said, "What's your name?" As soon as Jing Yu asked this question, she immediately felt that she was stupid. She actually asked for a snake's name. All right. Looking at you, I don't know if you're male or female. I'll call you Little Black, Red String, Black Red, Little Xiao. Jing Yu spat out a string of names. The little snake opened its mouth and lay on Jing Yu's hand like a corpse. What kind of names are these? You can't call me Little Black just because I'm black. Chapter 147. You can't call me Red String just because I have a red string on my belly. Woo-woo. I don't want to live anymore. The little snake lay there motionlessly. Jing Yu frowned in confusion. She didn't know what to call it. What are you doing? While Jing Yu was in a dilemma, Xiao Chun lifted the curtain of the inner room and slowly walked in. He saw Jing Yu sitting on the bed and frowning in thought. Jing Yu looked sideways at Xiao Chun. Aya, you came just in time. Jing Yu grabbed the little snake lying on the ground and excitedly jumped in front of Xiao Chun. What do you think I should name it? Xiao Chun looked at Jing Yu indifferently and said, Why are you grabbing a dead snake? Jing Yu was slightly stunned. She speechlessly poked the little snake's belly and said angrily, If you play dead again, this lady will eat you. Hiss hiss. The little snake suddenly rolled over and started to cry. Look, it's alive. Jing Yu winked at Xiao Chun and said. Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with a hint of seriousness. He looked at Jingyu with a gaze that seemed to have some hidden meaning. He slightly narrowed his eyes and said, "Where did you catch it?" "I didn't catch it. It followed me back." Jingyu looked at the little snake coiling around her arm. It was cold and comfortable, so she didn't stop it. However, Xiaochun couldn't stand it anymore. He grabbed the little snake's tail and raised his hand to pull it out. Hiss hiss. The little snake was angry. It raised its head and stared at Xiaochun with its dark green eyes that were filled with cold murderous intent. Red flower burial. Xiaochun looked at the red string on the little snake's belly and was shocked. He looked at the snake on the table with fear. His pitch-black eyes were filled with danger. One person and one snake confronted each other. Jingyu doubtfully blinked her eyes. "You recognize this snake? It's called Red Flower Burial?" Jingyu stretched out her hand and seemed to want to pick up the little snake. Xiaochun looked at Jingyu's actions, and his eyebrows fiercely twitched. The originally aggressive snake in Jingyu's hands was very obedient. This made Xiaochun frown. The continent's #1 venomous snake, Red Flower Burial. Xiaochun stared at the snake in Jingyu's hand with a complicated look and said, "When it's born, it's the same as an ordinary snake. The red line on its abdomen is its symbol. When it grows up, the red line will expand and the snake will shed its skin to become black." It seems to be very powerful. Hearing Xiaochun's introduction, Jingyu turned the little snake over in surprise. Looking at the faint red line on its abdomen, her eyes were full of surprise. It seemed that Jing Yin mistook this highly poisonous snake for a non-poisonous flower snake. Once bitten by it, you will die immediately. Xiaochun narrowed his eyes and looked at Jingyu's actions. He slowly said, "You won't even have a chance to save your life. That's why it's the most venomous snake." So domineering. Jingyu grinned and looked at the snake in her hand. "It seems like I have another life-saving method. If anyone dares to bully me, I'll get Little Blossom to bite them to death." Xiaochun was indifferent, but his eyes flickered slightly. "From now on, I'll call you Red Flower Burial. Be obedient and follow me. You'll have meat to eat." Jingyu looked at Red Flower Burial happily swimming on her arm, and her eyes were filled with joy. She looked up and met Xiaochun's scrutinizing gaze. Chapter 148. Jingyu looked at Zonghua happily swimming around her arm. She raised her head and met Xiaochun's scrutinizing gaze. Jingyu, you're keeping such a venomous snake by your side. If you're not careful and get bitten by it. Xiaochun's tone was heavy. It was obvious that he disapproved of Jingyu keeping it by her side. "Don't worry, it won't bite," Jingyu said calmly as she caressed Zonghua's body. "It's good to keep it by your side. It'll protect you from wolves." Jingyu glanced at Xiaochun. The meaning in her eyes made Xiaochun's face darken. "This king doesn't like it," Xiaochun said slowly as he grabbed Zonghua in his hand. His fearlessness shocked Jingyu. "Ayaya, it's going to bite you," Jingyu exclaimed when she saw Zonghua about to bite him. "SSSS." Zonghua opened its mouth and was about to bite Xiaochun's hand. "It doesn't dare." Xiaochun didn't move an inch. He narrowed his eyes as he watched Zonghua's actions. Jingyu was shocked to see Zonghua's sharp teeth graze Xiaochun's skin. Zonghua immediately retreated as though it had seen something terrifying. It scurried back to Jingyu's body with a frightened expression. "What's going on?" Jingyu could feel Zonghua's fear as it tried to burrow into her sleeve. She was completely stunned when she saw Xiaochun's calm expression. What happened to being the most venomous snake? Why doesn't it dare to bite a human? Are you fucking kidding me? This king said it wouldn't dare. Xiaochun looked down at the small wound on the back of his hand caused by Zonghua's fangs. There was a small trace of blood, and the corner of his mouth turned down slightly. He raised his hand to wipe it away and said to Jingyu, "You can keep it if you want." "Oh." Jingyu was still thinking about the reason, so she casually replied. "This king went to the palace today and made it clear that the etiquette examination will be postponed until the 10th of June. The injury on your leg should be healed by then," Xiaochun said calmly. "Aya, you really did it." Jingyu's eyes lit up in surprise when she heard this. She looked at Xiaochun with admiration and said, "Why does the emperor listen to you so much? Quickly tell me, Do you have something that can be used against the emperor? Xiao Chun stood up and looked calmly at Jingyu and said, "It was Great General Shangwan who spoke." This king didn't say anything. Great General Shangwan? Jingyu was stunned. Shangwan Hongwan, Great General Jinwu, is in charge of the defense of the capital, Xiao Qian said calmly as he paced around. Is it Shangwan Linglan's father? Jingyu blinked and asked.
Yes.
Xiao Qian paused and replied, Great General Shangwan is the emperor's favorite official. His words were naturally within consideration. After that, many other officials said that their children were frightened and wanted the examination to be postponed. Only then did the emperor order the postponement. So, you didn't say anything at all? Jingyu's face stiffened as she asked. Yes, Xiao Chun replied straightforwardly. I praised you for nothing. Withdraw. Jingyu stood up with a pout and hopped back onto the bed. She looked at her bandaged leg and sighed. How long has it been since we left the forest? Why does it feel like I'm getting injured every day? Chapter 149. Why did it feel like she was getting hurt every day? What a tragedy. Master, just as Jingyu climbed back onto the bed, Xingyi's voice came from outside the door. Rest well. Xiao Qin glanced at Jingyu before turning to leave. Jingyu stared at Xiao Qin's departing figure and faintly heard a voice from outside the door. Master, I found it. Let's talk in the study. As the voice faded, Jingyu knitted her brows. What did they find? In the following 10 days, Jingyu once again returned to her pig-like lifestyle. The summer was hot, and Jingyu's bad habits increased. She was picky and wanted to eat this and that. This made it difficult for the chefs in the prince's residence. They had to cook carefully every day, afraid that Jingyu would hit them if she was dissatisfied. Aya, this is really good stuff. Jingyu looked at the scab on her foot and her eyes lit up. She didn't think that the effects would be so good in 10 days. It really was a miracle medicine that Xiao Qin found. Imperial concubine, can you really participate in the exam like this? Yin Xiao looked at Jingyu's foot with a pained expression and blinked her eyes as she asked Jingyu, Don't worry, it's just an etiquette exam. It's not like I have to run with all my might. There's no problem. Jingyu stood up and walked a few steps. She didn't feel any discomfort. It wasn't like she hurt her bones. It was just a flesh wound. So how big of a problem could it be? You have to be careful. This servant heard that even the Empress Dowager is coming for this year's exam. Yin Xiao said with a sigh of relief when she saw that Jingyu's footsteps were normal. What's there to be afraid of? I didn't provoke the Empress Dowager. Jingyu didn't care and rolled her eyes. Imperial concubine, you can't think like that. Imperial concubine Yang Yang has always been close to the Empress Dowager. Who knows if she will say something she shouldn't in front of the Empress Dowager? Yin Xiao pouted and said with an unhappy expression. Jingyu immediately stopped in her tracks when she heard this. Yes, how could she have forgotten about this? That woman, Fu Ruoqing, wasn't a kind person. It seemed like she had to pay attention to this assessment. Early the next morning, Jingyu was woken up, freshened up, and headed to the examination grounds. Xiao Qin's carriage was quietly waiting at the entrance of the residence. When Jingyu came out, she was shocked. She didn't see Xiao Qin's figure when she woke up this morning. She thought that he had gone to do something again. She didn't expect that he would be waiting for her at the entrance. Why do you have time to send me off today? Jingyu had put on light makeup and was wearing the clothes given out by the academy. At first glance, she had a lovely and moving feeling, provided that Jingyu didn't speak. Xiao Chun looked at Jingyu sitting in front of him. Originally, there was a bit of surprise in his eyes, but when he saw Jingyu lying down on her back as soon as her but touched the soft couch and tilting her head to ask him a question, it really didn't match her clothes. It's on the way. Xiao Qin's eyes were filled with a smile as he slightly closed his eyes and spat out these two words. As expected, this was a woman's nature. Even after so long of etiquette training, it still couldn't change. This was very good. The etiquette training was in a temporary residence outside the imperial palace. There was a place specially set up for the assessment. The palace's mamas and other important people were all present. When Jingyu arrived, there were already many people present. The madams who had accompanied her were all sitting below the stage and watching. The assessment area was still empty. That was where the Empress Dowager and the imperial concubine Empress were sitting. There was also a group of female officials selected from the palace. This scene was indeed vast. Chapter 150. Go. I'll pick you up after you're done. Xiao Chun stood beside the carriage and raised his hand to pat Jingyu's head. However, when he saw the accessories on Jingyu's head, he stopped and slowly retracted his hand. Xiao Chun, I'm suddenly scared. What should I do? Jingyu looked at Xiao Chun with tears in her eyes. What? Xiao Chun was stunned and looked at Jingyu in confusion. I heard about what happened between Princess Leong and Princess Ailing. Do you think it will be the same this year? Jingyu looked at Xiao Chun with a wronged expression and said, What if I'm framed and fail the exam? Won't I embarrass you? Xiao Chun frowned and looked at Jingyu's nervous expression. He pursed his lips tightly. Where are you taking me? Jingyu was still trying to gather her emotions when Xiao Chun suddenly grabbed Jingyu's hand and turned to leave. I'm not taking the exam. Let's go home. Xiao Chun looked at Jingyu with a serious expression. Jingyu widened her eyes in shock and blinked at Xiao Chun. After confirming that he wasn't joking, she suddenly panicked and said, Won't it be even more embarrassing if I give up? What are you afraid of? If anyone dares to say anything, this king will make them unable to speak again, Xiao Chun said to Jingyu with a frown. Jingyu's eyes curved into crescents. Looking at Xiao Chun's appearance, her heart was full of emotions. This man was always so unexpected. All right, it's just an exam. It won't be difficult for me. Don't worry. Jingyu broke free from Xiao Chun's hand and said, Wait for my good news. I definitely won't embarrass you. After saying this, Jingyu didn't give Xiao Chun any reaction and skipped away. Xiao Chun was stunned and looked at Jingyu's figure with a frown. Master, the imperial concubine can definitely do it. Interrogation Officer 1 stood at the side and saw everything clearly. Now that he saw his master's worried look, he opened his mouth to speak. This king naturally knows. Xiao Chun stood with his hands behind his back and glanced at Xingyi. The expression in his eyes seemed to say that Xingyi was meddlesome. Xingyi looked at Xiao Chun's arrogance and felt wronged. What did he say wrong? Jingyu arrived at the waiting area. Shangguan Linglan and Ning Shangyuan were also there. The three of them warmly chatted for a while before they heard the summons. The Empress Dowager, and a group of judges were already in place. Just looking at them made one's hair stand on end. That's the Empress Dowager? Jingyu poked her head out and looked at the stage. That's right. I saw her once when I went to the palace with my mother. Shangguan Linglan said, This Empress Dowager looks gentle, but to be able to sit on the throne as the Empress in the previous dynasty and be the Empress Dowager now, you can imagine that she is the most terrifying person in the imperial harem. Tisk tsk. That's so scary. Jingyu shook off the goosebumps on her body and silently withdrew her gaze. After the announcement, it was time for them to go on stage. This time, the exam was the most basic etiquette. It started with kneeling, pouring tea, eating, banquets, and walking. There were 6 types of etiquette. This exam was testing these 6 types of etiquette. What type of etiquette to greet, birthdays, banquets, etc. After one examination after another, there was not the slightest mistake. The Empress Dowager and a group of female officials at the head of the table also nodded repeatedly, praising that this year's students were all good seedlings. The Empress Dowager also beamed with joy. In the afternoon of the examination, the last part of the examination was the walking and kneeling ceremony. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.